I watched my husband fasten a diamond collar around another woman's throat inside the brightest jewelry store at South Park Mall. I did not walk in. I did not tap the glass. I stood outside the window with a wrapped client gift in one hand and my phone in the other, watching Grant Ashford lower the clasp against Kendra Wexley's neck like he had practiced belonging to her in public. She tilted her chin toward the mirror, smiling at herself first and at him second, which told me more than tears ever would have. The clerk adjusted the velvet tray. Grant touched the small of her back. Kendra touched his wrist and held it there, soft enough to look accidental, long enough to make a wife understand the room she had not been invited into. When the clerk leaned over the counter and asked whose name should be placed on the receipt, Grant's mouth formed Kendra before his voice reached the glass. I stepped behind a column near the handbag boutique and called Maris Donnelly, my family attorney, because shock is only useful if you teach it where to stand. I'm looking at my husband buying jewelry for another woman, I said, keeping my voice low while a woman beside me compared wallets. Tell me what I can keep. Maris did not waste a breath. Do not confront him. Note the store, time, clerk, payment method, and anything sent to you through accounts you already control. The payment method arrived before my anger did. My studio expense app buzzed in my palm with a charge from Bellamy and Pike Jewelers, tagged under client appreciation, approved through the card I had issued Grant for legitimate private dining referrals. The memo line carried his own lie in neat black letters, and the amount sat beneath it like a signature he had forgotten could testify. I looked through the glass one more time as Kendra admired the diamonds against her skin, and I let the charge clear because stopping him would have saved money. But letting him finish gave me evidence. I walked out before Grant turned around, carrying the gift I had actually bought for a real client. I drove back to the studio with the mall receipt still glowing on my phone, and the whole city looked normal enough to insult me. A florist unloaded hydrangeas near the service entrance. My assistant had left linen samples across the conference table. 3 brides, 2 charity chairs, and 1 private dinner client were waiting in my inbox, all trusting Adrian Whitlock Events to remember what mattered. I did not search for Kendra first. I searched for Grant, because husbands who start selling a marriage leave fingerprints where they think affection still blinds you. 6 months of calendars opened in front of me, and the pattern came up quietly. Clients I had earned were appearing in threads with Kendra Wexley. Vendors who only discounted for my studio were tagging her at soft lunches and preview tastings. A rental invoice listed her as guest consultant, though I had never hired her. The uglier part was not the access. It was the story around the access. Grant had been telling people I was stepping back, burned out, overwhelmed, needing rest. All the gentle little phrases polite society uses when it wants to remove a woman without sounding cruel. No one had called me unstable. No one needed to. In Charlotte private rooms, a husband lowering his voice and saying, Adrian has had a hard season, could do more damage than any public accusation. I forwarded the clean pieces to Maris Donnelly, and she answered with one line, keep everything you lawfully received. So I made folders, not speeches, client emails, vendor confirmations, public posts from Kendra, calendar edits Grant had approved through his own authorized account. That evening, he came home smelling faintly of cedar, champagne, and another woman's perfume, then kissed my hair while setting his keys in the bowl I bought in Asheville. Dinner ran long with a new client. Babe. I looked at his cuff, where a pale shimmer clung to the fabric. Client likes diamonds? Grant smiled too late. And that half-second told me he had been rehearsing this marriage out from under me for months. I met Kendra Wexley 3 days later at a private tasting inside Russell Keene's dining club, where the napkins were pressed into sharp rectangles, and every woman in the room knew how to smile without offering warmth. She arrived without Grant, but she wore the diamond collar he had bought with my studio card, and that told me she had not come to taste scallops. She had come to be seen wearing proof. Kendra crossed the room in a cream dress that looked expensive from 20 feet and borrowed from 10. She held a champagne flute like she had studied old money through a phone screen, then stopped beside me as if we were two professionals meeting clean. Adrian, finally. I've heard so much about your studio. Grant says you're taking a step back. I kept my eyes on the diamonds at her throat before I let them rise to her face. That's funny. Grant says many things when he wants a door opened. Her smile stayed perfect, but her fingers tightened around the stem of the glass. The chef brought out a plated course for the spring luncheon, and I asked her whether Mrs. Latham's table should still be kept nut-free, or if Grant had updated that for her too. Kendra answered too quickly. Still nut-free, and no sesame near her daughter. Then she blinked, softened her voice, and added, I think someone mentioned it. That was the first clean cut. Mrs. Latham's daughter was not attending the luncheon, and the sesame note came from a private allergy file inside my studio system. I took one sip of water and let Kendra keep standing there with the necklace burning against her skin, because the mistake had already spoken louder than anything I could have said. After the tasting, Russell Keene pulled me near the side hall, his face arranged in that careful Southern courtesy men use before delivering bad news. Grant had suggested Kendra shadow a few spring events. Just temporarily, since I was supposedly reducing my client-facing work. I nodded, asked him to send that in writing for schedule alignment, and watched his discomfort settle between us. By then, I understood Kendra did not want Grant first. She wanted the rooms he promised her. I waited until Grant wanted something badly enough to mistake paperwork for applause. Men like him did not read fine print when the first page called them important. And by then, I knew the exact word that would make him careless. Director sounded cleaner than husband. Cleaner than liar. Cleaner than the man who needed my name to enter rooms he pretended he owned. Maris Donnelly had the agreement prepared with a small business attorney she trusted, and nothing inside it was fake. The title was real. The duties were real. So were the limits. Grant could coordinate private client introductions for Adrian Whitlock events, but he could not share client information, promise access without written approval, use vendor terms for personal benefit, or represent my studio beyond the authority I signed. The last section made him personally responsible for damage caused by misrepresentation, including conduct tied to any client relationship he had already touched. I placed the agreement on the kitchen island beside his coffee, close enough to look casual and formal enough to make him feel chosen. He came downstairs in a pale blue shirt, phone in hand, smiling at something he tried to hide before I could see the screen. I've been thinking, I said, sliding the papers toward him while toast darkened in the corner. You've always been good in private rooms. Maybe it's time we made your role official. Grant lifted the first page, and his face changed when he saw Director of Private Relations under his name. He did not ask why it was paper. He did not ask why Maris had reviewed it. He read the title, the event access clause, and the note about Russell receiving an announcement, then reached for the pen like the signature was already overdue. You sure? His voice tried for humble, but his hand was moving. Sign before lunch, I said. I'll send Russell the update. He signed every tab and missed every paragraph that mattered. I gathered the pages and watched him pour another coffee, like a man who believed a title could scrub fingerprints from a locked door. That night, his iPad lit on the counter with message sync still on. Kendra's name opened across the screen, and her sentence arrived clean enough to save. We're officially inside now. I let Grant and Kendra walk into the luncheon believing the agreement had made them legitimate. That was the cleanest part of it. They did not arrive together. Not officially. But he entered first with his new title sitting on his shoulders. And she followed 5 minutes later in a pale dress, wearing the diamond collar like a private joke she expected me to understand. The room was small, All white tablecloths, silver coffee service, and women who noticed everything without moving their faces. Russell Keene greeted Grant with careful politeness, then looked at me for half a second longer than usual. I knew the email had reached him. I knew he had read enough to stop smiling with his eyes. Kendra took a seat, 2 chairs from Mrs. Latham, and began performing softness. She praised the menu, the florals, the museum program, then leaned toward the wrong woman and mentioned that the late seating would be easier because Mrs. Latham's family preferred no sesame near the table. The fork and Mrs. Latham's hand stopped above her salad. "I'm sorry. Who gave you that information?" Kendra blinked once. Grant moved too fast. Adrian shared everything for the transition. I set my tea down. Not hard enough to startle anyone, just loud enough for the porcelain to answer him. That's interesting, because I never approved a transition. Grant's mouth opened, then closed around nothing useful. Kendra reached for her glass, and the diamonds shifted at her throat like they were suddenly too tight. I took the small envelope from my bag and passed it to Russell. Inside were the agreement Grant had signed, the message from Kendra saying they were officially inside, and Mrs. Latham's forwarded note confirming she had never authorized her private information to leave my studio. Russell did not read it dramatically. He opened it, scanned the first page, folded everything back with clubroom calm, and looked at Grant. "You'll hear from our membership office." That was all. No raised voices. No public scene. But Grant turned toward the door every time his phone buzzed, and every woman at that table saw a husband afraid of a message that was not coming from his wife. Kendra stopped performing sweetness by noon the next day. Her email came through while I was reviewing linen counts for a garden luncheon, and the subject line was almost polite. Clarification. The body was not. She wrote that if I tried to embarrass her or damage her reputation, she would make sure clients heard the version Grant had already been sharing. The tired wife. The failing studio. The marriage that had been over before she arrived. She attached screenshots because women like Kendra confuse proof with pressure when panic starts breathing for them. Grant had promised her access to my client list, vendor rates, and private dining rooms. He had written that I never needed to know until the transition felt natural. She had answered with laughing hearts, then asked whether Mrs. Latham's circle would trust her faster if Adrian looked too emotional to handle spring season. I forwarded everything to Maris without adding a sentence. Maris called 6 minutes later. "Do not answer her. Do not warn Grant. This is cleaner than anything we could have subpoenaed first." I stood beside my desk, watching rain stripe the studio windows, while those screenshots turned Kendra from a wounded mistress into a documented participant. She knew I was his wife. She knew the information belonged to my studio. She knew the plan required making me look smaller before she stepped forward. Grant came home that night with the color gone from his face and the manners of a man trying to outrun a locked door. Russell misunderstood the luncheon. "Babe, Kendra misunderstood your role. Everybody's emotional." I placed the printed email on the kitchen island between us. "Did Kendra know I never approved her access?" He said no too quickly. So I turned the top page toward him. His eyes moved across her own words, and the lie fell out of his mouth before he could dress it. She was scared. I nodded once, because fear had finally made both of them useful. Kendra had tried to save herself from Grant, but every screenshot she sent proved she had been holding the shovel with him. The ethics review happened in a private room at Russell Keene's club, not a courtroom, which made it worse for Grant. No audience could save him. No charm could spread thin across a table. There was Russell, an outside counsel with silver glasses, Maris beside me, Grant across from me, and 3 documents placed between us like a quiet meal nobody wanted to touch. Kendra had not been invited. Her guest access was already suspended. and the empty chair beside Grant said more than her presence would have. He kept looking at it anyway, as if the woman who wanted my rooms might still walk in and help him explain why my client files had ended up in her hands. Russell opened the folder slowly, then laid out the receipt for the diamond collar. The message where Kendra wrote that they were officially inside, and the agreement Grant had signed under his new title. Grant leaned back with a tight laugh that belonged to a man who had practiced innocence in mirrors. "This is a marital issue. Russell. Adrian is upset. And I understand that." Russell did not blink. "This is a membership issue. You represented access you did not have." Grant turned to me then, his face sharpening because he finally understood the room was not bending. "You set me up." I looked at the agreement with his initials on every page, then back at him. "I handed you a job title. You handed me the evidence." The silence after that was clean. Russell withdrew Grant's referral privileges, suspended his club access pending final review, and notified the affected members that their private information had been mishandled. Grant's face lost color one shade at a time. His whole career had been built on doors opening when he smiled, and that morning every door learned his name for the wrong reason. Lorna Ashford came to my house that evening with anger folded into her purse. She accused me of ruining her son until I showed her the recommendation letter Grant had sent using her name. She read it twice, sat very still, then placed my house key on the kitchen island. "I raised him better than this," she said, her voice thin but steady. "I won't lie better than this." Maris filed the divorce and the civil claims before Grant found another room willing to listen. Kendra settled first because discovery would have done what diamonds could not, made her public for the wrong reason. She paid, signed the apology Maris drafted, removed every post tied to my studio, and agreed to community service with a women's employment program. Grant fought longer, because men like him mistake delay for dignity. But the judgment still found him responsible for what his signature and messages had proven. I did not keep the old house. I sold the dining table, the guest silver, the framed photographs where Grant looked honest, because I had not yet learned which face was practiced. I moved into a smaller townhouse near Freedom Park, where mornings sounded like dogs barking, bike chains clicking, and coffee brewing without someone else's lies. My clients came back slowly, not out of pity, but because Russell's notice had made one thing clear. Adrian Whitlock events had protected their privacy when my own marriage did not. Months later, I passed South Park Mall and saw Bellamy and Pike shining behind the glass. I did not go in. My neck was bare, my hands steady on the wheel, and when a client called about a fall luncheon, I answered before the second ring. "Yes," I said, watching my reflection in the windshield. "Put it under my name." Thank you for staying with Adrian's story to the end. If this reminded you of a moment when peace finally felt stronger than being chosen, share your thoughts below. May every woman watching find a quieter morning, a safer room, and a life that answers only to her own name.